going to say is I have found that a lot of non-traditional venues, in terms of like comedians and stuff, they don't give a shit about if you're canceled or not. They're just like, oh, can you bring a whole new audience of people to my establishment? And right now, I think so many businesses, bars, restaurants and stuff, they're so desperate to get any kind of, shot in the arm that they're open. They've got to be open to doing different things, right?
Yeah, no, hey, look, it's worked for me. I'm getting calls to do stuff and in more major media areas than you would think that I would normally get called for. And for stuff that isn't political, I'm a political comic and that's the base of everything that I do. But people are like, can you act? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, why don't you try this? I'm like, because they understand that there's 75 million people at least that are out there, half the country that is conservative and wants to hear from these people. Thank God, honestly, for cancel culture to this extent. That only the only comedians, the primary amount or the major amount of comedians, like 98% of them are liberal, and so the 2%, I'm happy to be here to cash in, man.
Yeah, it's funny because a lot of people, I haven't always been super vocal politically, although I've always been very vocal with certain things. I guess as a libertarian, historically, what I've been mostly vocal about are the things that I think almost everybody agrees on, like, not, ending the war on drugs, not giving a shit what people put in their bodies or what they do in the bedroom or anything like that. But then as you sort of get even more hyper focused on individualism, I'll call it that more than I would call it conservatism or even libertarianism. That's where you start to lose a lot of the left, a lot of the very liberal people that I've become friends with and worked with in Los Angeles in my 11 years here. And so that's where I sort of diverged into more of the conservative, right-leaning. And then, some of my views have changed by making friends in that space, and they make better arguments about things and have convinced me, that some of my views maybe weren't necessarily well thought out, or that I didn't consider other things. And so now I think I'm probably more conservative than I was at the start of the whole shebang. But it's interesting to me how the conservatives or libertarians or individualists are now the more punk rock side of, of art and culture and entertainment. And the very sort of liberal people are more corporatist than, sort of rebellious and free-spirited. Do you find that to be the case?
Yeah. When did they switch? It's all the things. So under WA, I used to make fun of the hippies who were like, no blood for oil, big pharma's bad, right. Big corporations are bad. And I'm like, where are they now? Because I could go out to a drink with these people. Like, I agree with all of that stuff now. We've seen it all come out, all the stuff the hippies warned us about. And I'm like, where are the hippies? Well, the hippies are taking corporate jobs and supporting, Coca-Cola and Walmart and Amazon, and they want Bill Gates to make sure that they can shoot you up with any kind of vaccine he comes up with his programs and whatever. And it's like, what in the hell? Like, where did you guys go? Where was the switch?
Yeah, and missing the whole private corporations can do whatever they want to do thing of how that extends on to everybody. Like, now that we're to the point where, well, now private companies are going to force people to be vaccinated if they want to work there, if they want to, if they're like, for instance, there are studios now that are saying you have to be vaccinated if you come work on this film set, even if you're a grip, even if you're a production assistant, you have to be vaccinated. And so how do these people, many of them very well educated from very prominent universities, maybe well educated is the wrong term, but very, on
indoctrinated.
Paper, yes, very, very on paper, supposedly very smart people who don't see a problem with the private companies can do whatever they want thing, turning into forced vaccinations, forced re-education. A lot of these things that I would think a so-called liberal person would be staunchly against.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where it goes. And I always well, if you don't like it, you can start your own thing. Cool. Well, Parler did. And then Parler got shut down. So then you have to start your own web service provider too on top of that. I mean, this is, where does this end? You have to provide your own air in the end.
Yeah. And then let's extrapolate that out, right? Let's say you do start your own web services company, and then the company that makes the actual hardware that you built your services on says, we're not going to sell you any more hardware. And so now you have to go build a chip company and a drive company and a computer company. And then you don't actually control the plastics manufacturer. So you got to have a plastics. Like, how far does it go? I mean, this is, and I had Ron Coleman, the attorney, on the show last week. And I asked him, I go, at what point do we start to enter into the realm of organized corporatism in the form of racketeering? Because to me, that's what it's really become, right? Like, we're not actually taking your rights away, but we are colluding in a way that will make you choose to violate your own freedoms, or else you won't be able to survive.
Yeah, that's where I think that we need to be. Well, we need to be. 5 years ago, we needed to look at how we regulate the internet and what's going on with social media companies just to start. But we're beyond that now. It's too late, and it's now how do we correct for it? I'm not sure. But I mean, that's the thing. That like all the libertarians who say these are private companies. They can do whatever they want. Cool. Listen, guys, Donald Trump is gone now, and now that he's gone, and they're silencing Trump people, you're next. So I just want libertarians to realize that. I believe it was John Brennan who looped in libertarians in his list of people who should be considered terrorists or considered a terrorist threat.
Yeah.
I mean, you're next on the roster. So it's one of those, the boiling the frog thing. Like, you're going to make excuses when it's not you. It's going to catch up to you.
Yeah, it's funny. My girlfriend's Middle Eastern, and every time we fly or she travels, she always gets the bag tag that says your bag was randomly selected for a search. And when that Brennan list came out and libertarians were listed as, domestic terrorists, she goes, "Oh, I guess it'll be the same for us now when we fly. Your bag will be checked as well."
I do a bit on that, by the way. So I was in Austin Bergstrom Airport one morning, and it was kind of early, and I was wearing a hoodie like normal, and like they literally were separating people by color. I wish any kind of civil rights organization would have lost their shit seeing what happened at the separation, the pre-check and people who had to go through regular security. And so all of the people of color were put into the regular security, and they were waving everybody else the white people in suits through pre-check till they got to me, and they put me in regular security. And I'm like, oh, I get it. I'm the token white guy today.
Yeah.
And they stared at me, and I'm like, look at who you've just let through, folks.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. It's so funny. I mean, well, and we always talk about how the overwhelming majority of this sort of extreme left is sort of going to become inevitably the snake eating itself, and you already see some of that where like woke people are getting canceled for not being woke enough. It's so funny when you look, and this is kind of how we ended up saying, like, let's jump on a podcast to do this, because there are some examples where I think some of us diverge in the strategy a little bit, and I think that's interesting. And we sort of split where we're generally almost always in consensus, we sort of split a little bit on the Michael Che thing. Israel joke about the administration of vaccines, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, they called him anti-Semitic for it, and they wanted to cancel him for it. Listen, I'm just all about, at this point, you're dealing with children. And when you have a little kid that whines too much, one of the ways you deal with it is you whine the same way, or, they smack you as a little kid. You smack them just, a little bit once, the same way that they did to you. So they understand what they did. And that's kind of my strategy with it on all of this stuff is you smack them back with their own rules. Look, I'm happy to play by the left's rules. They don't want to play by their own rules, though.
True.
I'm very excited about trans women and women's sports. I love it. Sign me up. I'm happy to support all of them. I'm super excited. Put me in the middle of a pile of ultra progressive feminist women in the stands at a women's sport that has a couple of trans women in it. And I want to watch the trans women, especially in basketball, like dunk on people, hard check them, like smash the backboard, like growl. Like I'm all about it. Sign me up. I'll wave signs, everything.
Yeah, I think we all agree that Shaq in a wig would immediately make the WNBA watchable.
Oh, I love it. I mean, I'm all for it. That's like the weird thing is like, they always say that, conservatives and whatever are anti-trans. Number one, I have trans friends and I love them. But I don't need to say that to clarify this. I'm all for it. I don't know. I'm allowed to swear on this, right? I already have.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah, of course.
I want trans women to kick the shit out of women in women's sports. I'm so excited about that. And just women's soccer. Oh my God, please.
I hope that GameStop trans woman goes into the Olympics and competes in all of the events. And
didn't she have a mixtape?
I don't know. And every time she smashes some broad into the, podium, I want her to be like, it's ma'am. I think that, again, that would make the Olympics way more watchable than they are now.
I'm so excited for it. I can't even tell you. Like, I just
bring back weightlifting, bring back wrestling. It's absurd. And
boxing.
Yeah, and it'll get to the point where it'll be for our own amusement, right? It's sort of the be careful what you wish for.
Well, that's the thing. Like, are they going to ban you on Twitter for supporting trans women in women's sports? Because, the left knows what I'm saying when I say this, and I am 1,000% for it. Like, it's like one of those. When will they turn around and be like, oh my God, no, we can't do this? And that's really what happens when you use the rules against them. It's like at some point they go, wait, that's enough. No. And I'm like, wait, you said to do that.
But see, I kind of worry about the execution of it, like bad faith actors. So going back to the Che thing, it's like, well, we can attempt, and I think the attempt is correct to say, let's hold these people accountable in the same way we've been held accountable, right? Every time I tweet something that people don't like, they immediately jump into my bio and they see that I used to host a show for Food Network, even though it just says host of this show on Food Network, and they've never hired a new host. So technically I'm not necessarily the former host. I'm the only host, right? Mm-hmm. So, and I do it deliberately to show that these people do no research. Like, you can Google me, and the first thing you see is that when people went after the Food Network in 2018, when I first said something very unpopular, my show had already been off the air for 6 months. We just didn't get picked up because I wanted more money, and the network doesn't pay talent anymore. Like, nobody at Discovery, show me a person at Discovery who's been discovered in the last 2 years since the merger. It doesn't happen. They run a show now with a nobody from Carolina cooking in their kitchen, and then when that chick gets heat and wants money, they throw her in the scrap heap and they go get another one, right? That's where Instagram has sort of destroyed influencer-based television, is that there's no longer going to be anybody that's developed into the point of getting a lot of money. And even when Discovery bought Scripps, this summer my show was in its second season, they announced in the acquisition call, they were like, yeah, the greatest thing about Scripps is that we don't have to pay any talent. And it's like, when that happened, I looked at my director. We were actually shooting when that happened. I was like, well, it's been fun, guys, but it doesn't look like we're coming back. But neither here nor there, I leave it in so that idiots right in my bio see that, Food Network, that's a big company, and they immediately launch an attack to get me fired from the Food Network whenever I tweet something I don't like. The problem is, though, even when we show the hypocrisy, I don't feel like the consequences ever come. So, like, we can show and we can try to cancel people like Michael Che, or even, when the Gina Carano thing happened, everybody was very quick to go, Pedro Pascal did the exact same Holocaust comparison, inaccurately, might I add. He used a lot of bad info. He had like a picture of like, it was like Portuguese migrants or something that he said were people at the American border, which wasn't true. And that picture wasn't from 2018. It was from way before that or something. But made the same politically charged comparison to the Holocaust, no repercussions, no consequences. And so I just think that method is necessarily going to work, because it's clear with who's getting fired and who goes and who stays, that it's not about principle. It's just about party.
Yeah, you make a point with that. And it'll be very interesting. I'm working on a piece now for the Washington Times on this. Like, they don't want your money, kind of is the summary of it. I think we just end up creating our own media outlets. And you see what happened with Gina Carano. And I did a podcast on this with, it doesn't matter who I did it with. Who cares? But
no, I'm curious who you did it with. But
well, it was Andy Signor. Okay. So we did a podcast on this that night. I was on with a bunch of nerds just before she was let go, actually, I believe. And I was like, if I were her, I would just keep saying offensive things and then be a star in conservative land and make a ton more money than what I make right now for Disney. Yeah. And I'll be damned if 2 days later she wasn't signed with the Daily Wire, immediately signed with the Daily Wire. They are paying her probably more than Ben Shapiro to join the Daily Wire. I
guarantee on that movie, it sounds like she's going to direct it, produce it, and star in it. And so it's probably like a really back end heavy deal where she'll make more money on the points. Even if that movie tanks, she'll make more money on the points of ownership of that movie than she will have made being in 10 seasons of Star Wars where she gets no points on the back end.
Dude, she's smart. She's been in all sorts of stuff for years. I forget what else she had. So she was essentially like the first MMA fighter, female fighter. Like she was in the first main event in Las Vegas, right?
Yeah, she was the first star. She was in the first sanctioned women's MMA fight, I believe, or maybe it was the first sanctioned main event was her. She fought one of the biggest things that kind of gets overlooked. Talk about trans people in sports. She fought Cyborg before there was steroid testing in MMA. So, I mean, when you talk about a woman stepping in and fighting a trans fighter, basically, she essentially was the first to do it, fighting Cyborg, because Cyborg was probably on more testosterone back then than trans athletes are today. So, I mean, if you look at Cyborg's back in that fight, you would have thought Gina fought a dude. Like, I mean, Cyborg was fucking ripped. And you got to give Cyborg credit. Even when she came to the UFC and she started having to submit to testing, she was still pretty dominant until she ran into Amanda Nunes, who is just, next level Terminator. I don't even think Amanda Nunes is human. I think she was a martial arts cyborg sent back through time to destroy women's lives.
No,
she's a machine.
I've had a crush on Gina Carano for years now. So that's why I'm losing weight now. Now that I'm like a conservative, whatever, if I eventually run into her, she's not married, is she? Doesn't matter. That's not.
I don't know. I know. No, you know what's funny is I know Gina. We're friends. I'll text with her from time to time, but she keeps her personal life very private. And the thing that I think is so funny about the fact that they went after Gina Carano is like, here is a woman who went into a male-dominated sport and was a pioneer. And not just dominated, like was a pretty dominant performer. I think the only fight she lost was to Cyborg. She was a monster, right?
Until Ronda Rousey, she was it. Like she was the person.
And there was a lot of talk for a lot of years that Dana was trying to get Gina to come out of retirement and fight Ronda because of what a super fight that would have been. And I just think, I don't think like Gina fought at 145 and Ronda I don't think ever would have gone up in weight to fight her. But because she's a bigger chick. But here it is. So that's my point. Gina, who kind of like is inarguably a pioneer in what is hot and sexy for women, what beauty is, right? And even on The Mandalorian, she's not some fucking Ruby Rose twig with some asexual haircut. She's a feminine, curvy, badass woman, right? And you would think the woke left would have rallied around this woman to say, oh my God, she has an opportunity as the star of this major franchise to redefine what a beautiful action lead in a movie is, not 100-pound, gymnast, but a woman who's a real athlete, like a Serena Williams or that type of thing. And nothing. It's like almost like they give her, because she has different political views, none of the things they claim to be values of theirs hold up at all.
By the way, there's no way Ronda Rousey isn't a conservative. I saw that she's like a prepper. And she's got there's no way she's not.
100%. Yeah. I bet Ronda Rousey, here's a little speculation. I bet Ronda Rousey's in them QAnon message, but like a motherfucker. She's probably in there under like Warcraft Jiu-Jitsu 16 or something. Like she's really into video games and stuff, but she's a prepper. You're right about that. Grows her own food.
She's got goats and stuff. Oh yeah, she's
yeah. So I'd be willing to bet like probably the reason you haven't heard shit from Ronda Rousey is she is probably knee deep in QAnon for the last 2 years.
She's getting ready. She's getting ready for that stuff. No, dude, and I love it. Like here's the thing: I think people need to realize. And by the way, before we move on, since you're friends with her, if you find out she's into weenie comics,
I'll put in a word, Tim. I'll put in a word.
And also before we go on too, I never thought to tweet at her until one night I was watching the American Gladiators channel on Pluto, and I watched her just eviscerate like these poor contestants were doing it. Like the old American Gladiators, you were just up against people who were on steroids, but like this was like post MMA fighting days, still like. I mean, not that she's not out of shape now, but like she was still like in like fighting mode where I'm sure it's like muscle memory. destroying these poor women, and I was cackling like watching the show. It was so enjoyable. She threw this woman off the whatever it was.
It was like a pyramid, right?
Yeah,
that they had to climb. Yeah. I think she talked about that in her Ben Shapiro interview, where she was like, I felt horrible because I was like ruining this girl's dreams.
Murdering. They had neck braces on. They probably put them on those girls because of her. Anyway, all that aside.
Yeah, exactly.
That was so entertaining. What were we talking about? Ronda Rousey being a pervert? Here's the thing. There are more conservatives in this country than there are liberals. And I think that there's more entertainers and athletes who are conservative than realize it. And I think a lot of people, because they don't talk about it, feel like they're on an island by themselves. And really, if they start communicating and start being more upfront with it, I think we'll realize, and they will realize, that there's a coalition to be had. Well,
and then it will normalize it a little bit to where people will go, okay, well, these people aren't all Nazis and terrorists or whatever.
They aren't.
I was going to ask you this because you're a pretty prominent conservative on Twitter. Anytime, whether it was myself or even other celebrities get canceled in the media, I always get message from A-list or B, very few A-list, probably 2 A-list, probably about a dozen B-list celebrities who are terrified to speak out, who will literally seek refuge in my DMs and go, oh, here it is again, man, another one. This is why I can't say shit. This is why I can't speak out, because they'll come for me just like they came for Gina. And it's like, it's in one way, it's sort of comforting, going like, oh, it's nice to know that people feel that they can trust me and come to me. But on the other hand, it's like, hey, if you all stopped fucking hiding, this would become more accepted. In a weird way, I feel like a guy in the 90s who's got like 30 gay friends on the internet who refuse to come out of the closet. And I go, if you guys all got together and came out of the closet, this wouldn't be so taboo anymore. And you could all be happy with your lives. But on the same hand, it's not my place to force people out of the closet. And so when media outlets stuff are like, name names, it's like, it's not my place to do that for them. They have to choose to do it for themselves. But being a conservative now is exactly like being gay in the 50s or 60s. Like if somebody were to come out as conservative, you see what happens.
Well, the thing is, I think there are more and more executives and more prominent people who are realizing that they're not alone anymore. It's you're right. It's like super duper weird with this stuff. And the same thing, I see who likes my tweets, and I've gotten messages as well. And it's always kind of fun when I'm like, there are bigger and bigger people who are very clearly conservative here and just are afraid to say something about it. But, more and more athletes, like basically anybody who's a pro wrestler too. I love pro wrestling to begin with. I'm a big nerd. And then I realized that like my favorite wrestlers listen to me on the radio when I host for Sirius XM and like stuff like that. And I'm like, what? I have your theme song in my gym playlist. I mean, there's like, so like, that's super cool. But no, the thing is, and what the message has to be with all of this is that there are more conservatives out there than I think liberals in this country. And people need to realize, and by conservative, by the way, I include libertarians who haven't lost their minds because of Trump, because Trump was a Democrat before he was a Republican.
Yeah, a lot of people forget that. He used to go on Oprah when he was toying about being a presidential candidate in the 80s and 90s, back when she had her regular talk show in Chicago. And his views were always staunchly Democratic.
Oh, yeah. And because the left has gone so far left, like, so if you look at the spectrum, they're so far over here. All of this area really is conservative and Republican now. And, I think the Republican Party, other than a few billionaires who continue to drop money at things, are over the social issues like, gay marriage and, the trans. Nobody I know gives a shit about, actual trans person using the bathroom. Nobody cares. Like if there's a man that's chosen to become a trans woman that walks into a bathroom, there's not a single woman, I believe, in the world, like 99.99999% of women would be like, great, I don't care. You're a woman like me.
Right, unless she's in there helicoptering her dick around and slapping people in the face with it, no one cares. But by the way, I would be bothered by that in a men's room by another guy. Like, it's not the trans part, it's the obnoxious dick flinging that is a problem. I don't know what you call yourself.
There was a homeless guy that used to jerk off in my back alleyway in DC, and I kind of got used to it. So
you'd stock him up on Jergens, make sure he's got up-to-date materials.
By the way, who's super conservative? Porn stars. All of them.
Isn't that wild? Isn't that a wild thing? I've come to that realization too. They're all very, I think Jenna Jameson's like a major Q person, right?
She was a big libertarian before that too. But like, and let me tell you something too. Like, I mean, not that this has anything to do with anything. I've kind of followed her story, and she's had ups and downs, and she's really dealt with a lot of like her demons and stuff. And I really respect her because of all the stuff that she's been through, and like where she's like kind of come full circle with her life and stuff. Like that's been a hell of a fun journey, not a fun journey, but a hell of a like an encouraging journey.
Well, it's also just interesting, right? And that's the thing is like interesting is the currency I think we all get up for every day. And this is the thing that I think television and media is going to wake up to really quickly, whether they want it or not, is that interesting means that sometimes you need to have bad guys too. I mean, this is what the media never really anticipated when they colluded to get the president out of the country, which whether you consider that a conspiracy theory or not, it's like, is COVID a conspiracy? I don't know about that, but is the way that COVID has been reacted to by political officials, the media, etc., was that a conspiracy? I 100% believe that the embellishment, reaction, and overreach that has been a byproduct of COVID was entirely intended just to get rid of Donald Trump. I 100% believe that.
And that's also why he called it, what did he call it? That gets, not that it's a scam. What was his line at the rally that he not so eloquently said?
Yeah, I can't remember.
It's a hoax?
The hoax. I think he called it a hoax.
Because he called it a media and Democrat hoax.
Yes.
And
that part I agree with. Do I think the virus is a hoax? No. I think it's an inconvenient reality, right? I think a biological weapon snuck out and our government seized the opportunity to pin it on the guy they wanted out, and they knew he was going to get reelected. He was moonwalking into re-election in the economy we had in 19 going into 2021, right? And so they said, look, a lot of people are going to die. We can spin this. We'll get him out. But what they don't understand ultimately is like, have you even turned on the news since Donald Trump is out of it? I mean, they're going to realize very quickly, like all of when the first quarter, like Nielsen numbers come in and advertising numbers come in, and these brands start realizing that there's no longer any revenue to be made in traditional media, it's going to go belly up. It's like, if you are going to get rid of a very entertaining villain, you better have an equally interesting hero to push. And without that's not Joe Biden and it's not Kamala Harris. So you got rid of the big bad and you don't have a hero to pin the franchise on. So now it's just gonna go into oblivion.
Well, it's the same thing. And even if you have an equally entertaining hero, it dies off. So not to go back to pro wrestling because I'm a nerd and I'm happy
let's use the heel face analogy that
listen, you don't want a face to have the championship belt too long. The money's in the chase, right? You beat up the heel over and over again, and the heel keeps getting away with it. The bad guy gets away with it, and then finally, you have the big payoff at your big pay-per-view that the good guy wins. But then you need to take the belt off of him in 3 months because that gets stale. You can't keep having him be there.
And then, the heel turn is something that I think a lot of people live for too. I mean, is there a bigger moment in pro wrestling history than when Hulk Hogan joined the NWO? I mean, that was like, that was the most that I remember. I think I was like 12 or 13 when that happened. And I remember being like, I wasn't a kid that was in tears, but I was like, oh my God. Like, I was like, this is balls. This is the idea that you're going to make Hulk Hogan a bad guy. I mean, that takes big balls of steel to take somebody who's been this sort of American hero in wrestling, the eat your vitamins guy, and you're going to make him a villain. I never saw that coming. And that's that. But I do think that kind of thing has conditioned us in how we view our stars, whether they be heroes or villains, or they turn from one to the next. But ultimately, heroes and villains just have to be interesting people. And I think television is going to realize that they're going to need people to be hated on their networks as much as they're going to need people to be loved. And so I was talking with a friend about this yesterday, texting back and forth. I said, how many meetings you were in the marketing world or the marketing side of companies, right? In your past lives.
Yep.
And so how many social media meetings will the Food Network people sit through and talk about the fact that I get mentions 3-1 over everyone on their network before they go, why don't we just bring him back as a judge to be like a Simon Cowell, and people will watch because this guy's fucking hated.
No, you're right. You're 1,000% right. And you know, I don't really watch the news anymore, but I'm going to be debuting on a very new program next week with WGN's new 24-hour news channel. And
that's exciting.
Because people know, look, when I did stuff at WTTG and Fox 5 in DC, which I was there for about a year and a half, and they ran out of money because of local advertising, and they actually have to do reporting, it turns out. They would bring me on Friday nights to play basically the heel character. And so, you know, they had their traditional hosts. They had two talk show things that I would do. And I'd come in and shit on everything. And the thing was, it's honest. Like, I'd like disagree with them on almost everything. And I hated DC, so it's great.
You're not Andy Kaufman going against your own principles to play the heel. It's not even that complex.
No, and the numbers went up on Friday night, which for those of you playing along at home, numbers do not typically go up on Friday nights for channels. And so that's what someone very smart paid attention. And that's what's going to happen. I'm not going to play a heel at WGN. I get to actually be funny there. But it's just, it makes sense to do. And that's why that's what I'm saying now. There's such a shift with things that I do. And I haven't said anything crazy, and I'm definitely not a Q person, and I'm not any of that kind of stuff. But I've been this consistent like hum that has not like sold out. Man, if I sold out, I'd have 1 million followers on Twitter right now. And I watch those people like go down that rabbit hole and, you know, pretend that they're some sort of a breaking news person and sell hope that was not there and all that kind of stuff. I could have really cashed in on that stuff.
Are you talking about the people that that literally like the day after the inauguration were like, we found ballots? Those people? Yeah, I mean, that kind of stuff. Listen, when the day after the election, I was like, listen, it's over. Do I think it was legit? No. Do I think any of them have probably been legit since Kennedy? Probably not. But I think, you know, I was immediately convinced that it wasn't legit the second that they started coming out going, this is all legit, by the way. And you're like, wait a minute. Yeah, it's like, you can't just come out and go, by the way, I know this looks bad, but this is all legit before anyone even covers it. And then you start, companies like YouTube and Facebook start coming out and going, listen, if you post content that says that the election was a fraud, we're just going to take it down. And it's like, well, that looks like it was a fraud, man.
Yeah, no. I looked at, look, I'll go ahead and say this because I've said it privately. I don't think I've ever said this publicly. I had a member of Trump's legal team on the radio with me, and I looked at his legal team, especially the people who were the face. And, you know, one day one of them was the hottest thing, and then the next day they denounced that person, and then back and forth, and the game playing and whatever else. And I asked a member, somebody who's actually a legitimate attorney on the radio, what he thought about the team and if they were capable of, you know, being able to make any waves in court with what was going on. And he refused to answer the question. And I literally said, so that's a no. Good to know. But, you know, I looked at that legal team and I'm like, okay, so the faces of it, just see, like, Giuliani's out there because he's a talking head anyway. But the other people who were around Giuliani, I was like, you're just trying to get famous. Like, I saw nothing. Like, I understand that they could have gotten to something in court, but they needed to be realistic with this for people. And the bottom line is, even if there was something to be found, which I think there was plenty, a month isn't enough time to find it. And
no, of course not.
When they're peddling like the next big thing is coming, they lost me at the Kraken. By the way, they totally lost me at the Kraken. I'm like, no attorney would say that. Then I think it was Jenna Ellis told somebody they had a small penis or something. At some point on Twitter, and I'm like, what? This is not, if you're for real, you're not on Twitter telling somebody that they have a small penis. You're managing a team of people who are pulling in evidence.
Yeah. It's you know, it's those kind of things I think are unfortunate when they sort of discredit the credible arguments. I feel the same way about that as I feel about, you know, when people try to say in response to like the Gina Carano thing, and they go, well, you know, Disney has to cancel that woman and fire her because they're losing money. And it's like, you and I both know they don't even know if they're losing money for 4 months. They don't know if that cost them any money. But I will tell you what did cost them money. When 1 million people or whatever that were conservative just overnight canceled their Disney Plus, they noticed they lost money then, and they are panicking. And they're realizing like, yeah, there might be bigger financial consequences to canceling conservatives than there is to, not bending to the mob.
Well, apparently her action figure was already hard to find, and then Hasbro canceled her action figures, her Star Wars whatever black figure and whatever, and one of them now sells for $500.
Well, yeah, exactly.
It's like, you idiots! Like, how do you not as a Hollywood executive, and I guess because you're in your own bubble with yes men, same with like Democrat politicians, how do you not realize that there's such a large audience out there that just by winking in the direction of, you could make millions of dollars? And the thing is, they do know this. I can say this. I didn't sign an NDA, I don't think, for this. I could give a shit anyway. But, I've had a bunch of auditions with NBC to be a host of things. They stopped about a year ago when things went full like anti-Trump, but they were bringing me in because they were like, especially with their Peacock program, they were like, wait a second. If we get a prominent conservative that can actually host a TV show, I bet people would tune in. And it's like, yeah, dipshits, they would.
Well, it's like when I followed Last Man Standing really closely because I was in their time slot when I had Ginormous Food at Food Network. And so we were always buried by that show. It was on network. We were on cable. But we were in the exact same time slot at 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific. And I remember getting creamed by that show, but also being shocked at how many other shows it creamed as a conservative show. And it was like when they canceled it, so many people out here in California were just like, yeah, well, if it's not making money. And I go, are you kidding me? That was their cash cow. That was by far their biggest cash cow of a network show on Friday nights. And
Roseanne, remember when Roseanne came back?
Yeah. And then they canceled her. And it's just like, and the funny thing is a lot of people don't recognize this, but like all of the tweets. So like my canceling, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but I said something politically unpopular, really just sort of acknowledging how openly racist you can be towards white people, and how accepted that is. And I did it in a very comedic, hyperbolic way by comparing it to the N-word in 2018. And then what people did was they went back and found a bunch of old jokes of mine making fun of different races, making fun of gay people, making fun of trans people, and then tried to connect those two things and say this person is clearly a racist and a white supremacist. The thing that they don't ever stop to realize is all of those old tweets that were racial jokes or making fun of gay people or there's plenty of making fun of white people too, just nobody ever really looks for those. But all of that stuff was reviewed when I went to work for Food Network in the first place. Like we went through all of my tweets, my albums, my podcasts, everything. They go through everything. And their response to everything was like, yeah, we get it. You're a comedian. Like this is what comedians do. So in 2016, that was the response from a major network of, yeah, we get you're a comedian, and that's it. So they had like questions about a couple things like, well, what's the context of this one? And some were like replies to threads that didn't exist anymore. So they didn't make sense. And they go, well, hey, if we can clean some of that stuff up where there's no context and it's obvious, we'll go in and delete those for you. And they did. And I had no problem with that. But for the most part, they were like, no problem. Like, we get it. You're a comedian, whatever. And so when the canceling happened a couple years after that, they never made a comment. They never said anything because they know I have legal documents that show that we reviewed my content and you signed off on it. And so there was literally a background check that said, here's all my social, you look at it, and when we sign the contract, it means you're good with this. And so the reason that companies can't necessarily comment on, these things directly is because then they would have to, they would be outlining what policy specifically they say you broke. And then if they're not actually adhering to their own code of conduct, or there's inconsistencies in how that's applied, which there always is, then they would absolutely open the door for a lawsuit, right? And the one that was the most obvious to me was Shane Gillis's, where I said, listen, there are documented instances where comedians of color, the network went in and cleaned up their messy tweets when the people tried to cancel them and didn't fire them from the show. And you are a straight white male from, the Trump belt, if you will, rural sort of suburban Pennsylvania, Philadelphia. That's all very conservative, right? And they basically publicly fired you for being a racist. And that's clearly outside the lines of the code, the way they've enforced the code of conduct with comedians of other ethnicities and genders. And, you know, I'm sure I didn't know Shane back then. I only know him through social media now, but I'm sure at the time his team said, listen, you can't sue NBC. You'll never work again. And then they fired him and he'll probably never work again. It's like, so, you know, I do believe that, you know, conservative comedians have to fight back. We have to know our rights. We have to get litigious when it makes sense. But eventually we're just going to have to overwhelm the opposition with, you know, with the reality of what you said, that, you know, half the people in this country are conservative, if not more than that.
Yep. No, and that's I agree with you on all that stuff. I mean, it's just wild though, you know. And there are folks who are should be progressive and should be Democrats who have been shifted because of these issues. Andy Signor, one of them. He was one of the founders of Screen Junkies, and he was basically they created a false Me Too scandal with him to get him out of Screen Junkies, to get control of the company from him, basically, and forced him out. It was like awful what happened. And I think that he ended up getting paid very handsomely out of it because he's a smart guy. But that kind of stuff is happening. And I mean, the only way you win is by fighting back.
Well, and the idea, too, that, like, you know, things like I'll go back. We could probably say the first real high profile canceling like that, organized to basically strip somebody of their power, influence, and ownership in something, was the Donald Sterling case. And the reality is, if you think Donald Sterling is the only NBA owner that's a racist, you're out of your fucking mind. Mm-hmm. You know, and I always joke about that. Like, you do know these owners trade, buy, and sell black people for entertainment and profit, right? So in some element, if we're looking at this from 30,000 feet, there's not a guy who owns an NFL team that is like woke. It just, the principle of what the concept is, assigning a value to an actual human being based off of their physical capabilities, is no different than the slave trade of 300, 400 years ago, right? On principle. But the message of getting rid of a guy like Donald Sterling is just, listen, if you don't hide it, we'll make an example of you. But you're not getting rid of it at that level at all. And I say this because, and this is not like a super woke take from me, this perspective comes from having gone just to like a season ticket holder event for a football team. I hosted a charity event a few years back, and watching just how season ticket holders speak to athletes and look at them when they speak to them and everything. Like, there is a lot of like trading livestock vibe to the way that people who feel like they have ownership in a sports franchise actually view the players. It's pretty fucking gross. And by the way, that's not racially exclusive, because the rich, wealthy black guys who also had season tickets behave the same way. Yep. So it is sort of this weird sociological, psychological thing when people feel like they have ownership in something that directly involves athletes, right? But where I was going with that is there's a lot of those things out there that's sort of like this. It's a ghost. You would have to shadow box the world to think that you're going to fight that, because it's really about a subconscious way of looking at the world than somebody being an actual racist in their day-to-day behavior and what they're actually doing, and they're actually out to harm people. And so if you try to like dig that out of every person in society, if you dig deep enough, you'll find it in everyone.
Yep.
It lives in every person in some way or another, from the guy who owns a basketball team all the way to the woman who crosses the street and clutches her purse when she sees a darker person than her, right? So, you know, it's a weird thing to try to differentiate which people are villains and which people are heroes in that quality of human beings, in that quality of humanity.
Yeah, I have nothing to add to that. I'm really, like, I mean, it's like weird when you make like a good point. I'm like, I don't need to talk. You nailed that there. You make a very, very interesting point with that. And of course, you know, South Park covered the slave trade with NCAA players, which is even worse because at least NBA players get money. You know, it's freaking crazy.
And that's the differentiation too. I also, when players come out and go, this is like modern day slavery, it's like, well, it's not. When you're being enriched beyond 95% of the populace, I don't know if you could really call it slavery, but does it feel that way in the way that you're treated? Yeah, I've seen, and I believe it 100%. And that just because, like you said, you're becoming a millionaire and doing it, it doesn't mean that the bedside manner gets to go out the window and that you can be spoken to that way or treated that way. And so when I think about like the Kaepernick thing, number one, I was a guy who I didn't believe Colin Kaepernick really kneeled or sat for the reasons he later claimed to. I think I followed that closely because I was a Chip Kelly fan, and he had been fired from the Eagles, sent to the Niners, and there was a lot of smoke that Chip Kelly was a racist because the team somehow had more white guys on it when he was coaching, which was like 13 out of 60, right? Too many, apparently. And then when he went to the Niners, that was sort of this stinky legacy that followed him from Philadelphia. And so I knew when Kaepernick sort of sat because he was pissed that he got benched, and then later was like, it's about injustice. It's about what's happening in this country. And then sort of like, you can tell when somebody's building a story while they're talking. And you could definitely see him doing that in that first press conference. And then I saw you making this gesture. Obviously, he was like, oh, now I can just be this guy and pivot and go down this road.
We don't know how long that Nike deal was in development with him. That's the thing. Yeah. I mean, the fact that he's getting paid to be, I mean, he's not even an athlete, to be like a woke shoe salesperson. I mean, that's like, it's crazy to me.
Do you watch the show on HBO, Euphoria?
No.
There's a great, even if you don't watch the show, there was an episode they released around Christmas, and it's a one location, and it's the main girl played by Zendaya with her drug sponsor, who's
Zendaya racist. Zendaya, you racist. Say the name right.
I think it's Zendaya.
You white man. Get it right.
So anyway, do you know what her last name is, by the way?
Jones or something? Was it Smith?
No, it's Franklin, but okay. That's me. Yeah, I'm the racist. But anyway, so
Zendaya, Michelle Franklin or something like that, right?
Yeah. But anyway, she's sitting down and talking, and it's an amazing bit of acting. It's one of the best hours of television ever made. And it's all one location, so much dialogue. But her sponsor is like, that the BLM stuff that's posted all over Nike, like that's a work too. That's just marketing. And the shoes are still overpriced. And so if Black Lives Matter, lower your prices so that your black customers can afford them. I'm butchering the dialogue, but it basically spells out that you're being equally manipulated by both sides, and nobody there really gives a shit about it anyway.
Oh, by the way, I just fact checked you. It's actually Zendaya Marie Stormer Coleman.
Oh, Coleman. Yeah. See, we're both wrong.
But also, it's really creepy that she's 24 years old and she looks like she's 15. That's really creepy to me. But no, you're right.
Yeah.
Other than the Franklin thing.
Coleman. Yeah. I thought it was Franklin. God damn it. Now we're both wrong. I'm going to go in and edit it.
You're going there. It's Franklin now.
Yeah. I'm going to go into her Wikipedia and go, it's rumored that it's actually Franklin.
By the way, don't get me started on, and we're not going to do this because I could go down a whole rabbit hole of actresses and singers who look like they're 12 and are branded as such. That really creeps me out. Like I start to sound like a Q person.
Well,
when you get me into that.
Do you know Adam Yenzer?
No, I don't know.
Adam Yenzer is a conservative comedian. He's actually a writer for Ellen, and he was on my show a couple episodes ago. But I had him on a podcast where he came over my place many years ago, and I brought up this subject. I said, why is it like if a guy is caught with a woman who passes for 30 and turns out she's 15, we call that guy a pedophile. We send him to prison. But if a guy is with a woman who looks 12 and just happens to be 21 or 18, nobody bats an eye about that at all, right? And then he said, yeah, if you think about it, the girl who's on To Catch a Predator as the bait, who's actually like 26, she goes home to a boyfriend who legally fucks her every night. He goes, that guy, whether he knows it or not, won the pedophile lottery because he gets the woman who's 26 who looks 12. That's and then it's a great, but he was like, it was one of those things where two comedians are riffing and neither of us can decide who should take the bit. And it just sort of stayed out there, but it very much is a bit like
stolen. I'm using that on tour. That's amazing.
Yeah, but it's amazing, right? Like that is the guy who the Catch a Predator bait girl goes home to won the pedophile lottery.
How many guys did you? Yeah. Do you think he's like, hey, just leave your outfit on when you come home today.
Yeah.
Just leave the Cookie Monster shirt on.
Yeah, he asks her if she can leave some cookies on the table and go in the other room.
Have a seat.
Yeah. So, but it is funny that you mentioned that. It is and that's, you sort of get into this weird conundrum of like, what is socially acceptable? It's the same argument I make about being very pro-life, as I say, well, listen, when we talk about whether or not abortion should be legal or illegal, we first have to establish what is the purpose of law. If the purpose of law is to protect human beings and reserve their independent, inalienable rights as citizens of this country, then you have to do that for unborn children as well, right? Mm-hmm. So that they can be born and make their own decisions, and they essentially have the same freedoms and opportunities that everyone is supposedly granted. And it wasn't until Adam Yenzer, for instance, kind of spelled that out to me and said, well, if you're a libertarian and you believe in people having independent freedoms and the ability to choose for themselves, why would you let somebody choose whether or not another person gets to live in any circumstance? And I said, okay, that makes sense. But on the flip side, it's like, well, then you have to go, then do we have the right to kill people under the death penalty? And, at what point does somebody forfeit their right to their inalienable rights, right?
Well, typically people who are on death row killed somebody, so we don't
usually, yes.
That. Yeah. I don't think anybody's been the 3 strikes and you're out, jaywalking.
Yeah, man, if it wasn't for that 16th DUI, I would not be walking the Green Mile.
Yeah, I mean, there's there's a.
By the way, if they did execute on DUIs, the population of Wisconsin would be 2.
The population of DC would be 3 or 4.
Yeah.
No, I don't know how far we got off of this. Let's get back to how Gina Carano's cute.
I feel like that's going to be the sole remainder of the show.
No, I just, you're right though. They, to talk about cancel culture and what the opportunity Disney had with her and Blue, because they're stupid and they're too woke for their own good. It's like they hate their audience and they hate women. I mean, you're right. She doesn't look like a normal, wafy, chick who's on TV. And then there's, they're always they always push these like morbidly obese women. I always love that they go to the extremes on this stuff. So like Cosmo has these morbidly obese women on, and like the one was like, I'm on the cover of Cosmo. I'm going to eat a cake with the cover of Cosmo. And it's like, okay, we get it. You probably have gout and you're going to die of whatever.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. But like a normal woman, and Gina Carano's not a normal woman. She could murder everybody with her bare hands, even if she stopped working out for the rest of her life. But she looks like a normal woman.
Yeah.
And they had a real because there's can you name another Disney celebrity or another Star Wars or anybody who looks like a normal woman?
Well, and even just like sexy, feminine, like the other person I would put in this category too that has that kind of energy is like Rachel Ray, right? Yeah. Like Rachel Ray is like the hottest wife at the company picnic. And I would say the same thing about Gina Carano, right? Like Gina Carano is, and the thing that makes her, I think, so much more sexy is that sort of attainability factor, whether it's personality or energy or whatever. I think part of what people love about her and what people loved about Ronda Rousey is there is like a very down to earth vibe about them. They're not like a Zendaya, for instance, whatever you want to call her.
I want to call her the way that she says her name.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought it was Zendaya. Anyway, I'll bring the missus in, who's an expert on celebrities, and she'll tell us. But yeah, like there is an element of when you see a girl who's like 6 feet tall and 92 pounds, where you just go like, that's not a real person. That's a supermodel, and she will live on magazine covers, and I will never know her in real life. And the thing that I think makes someone like a Gina a star is that there's this sexiness to her that is a quality of, this is a woman I could meet in real life. This is a real person.
No.
You don't think so?
No. See, it's different for me. I don't, she just looks normal because she just looks normal, but no, I don't get that. Like you can meet her in real life thing. So the thing that does it for me with Ronda Rousey and her is that I can mouth off and get away with saying anything to anybody. And I feel like if I said the wrong thing to them, they'd I'd be like, I'd die. They would kill me.
You like the imminent threat of violence from.
I like the imminent threat. There's not there are very few people that can keep my mouth in check. That's why Tim runs his mouth. But and
I was gonna say you're like these girls with rape fantasies whose sex lives have been ruined by Me Too.
Oh my God, that went so far. By the way, very odd that women did. That's a whole nother talk too. We're going to keep off of that because you could. The thing is, I used to work blue as a comic, which is very fun. If I ever run for office or anything like that, there's hours of footage of me on stage saying everything awful, and I have to stop myself. One of my very good friends in town here. He's like, your Twitter is very tame compared to you. And I go, yes, it's incredibly tame compared to me.
Smart, by the way. You shouldn't use it as the joke notebook that I did for the first 10 years of my career.
Well, I mean, I did. I think there was I've got some dumb stuff on there, but I always just kind of kept it in check. And I knew that I kind of felt like the woke thing was coming. I can't say that I knew it was coming, but I had a feeling the woke thing was coming. So I was a young member chair at the National Press Club in 2010. And when so I represented all media under the age of 25, under 35 for about 2 years. And I kind of saw where it was going. And so I was very judicious with what I put up there. I was paying attention to that kind of stuff. But like when you get me on stage at whatever, I'd say whatever the fuck. And a lot of that still goes through my head. So like the rape fantasy joke or whatever line that you said, like you'll never catch me saying that here. You'll get it live on stage maybe. And it'll be very fun when my like Pearl Clutchy fans and people who don't realize that I cuss all the time show up to see me live. And I think that happened with Rosie O'Donnell, actually, when Rosie O'Donnell had her Cushball show. She'd have fans show up to see her live and she'd cuss a bunch and talk about sex on stage. And they're like, wait a second, we expected, slide whistle jokes.
Yeah. Yeah. We expected Roseanne Connor, not Roseanne Barr. Right. And
no, Rosie O'Donnell.
Oh, Rosie O'Donnell. Why? For some reason I thought you said Roseanne.
Because they sound the same.
Yeah.
By the way, I have a Rosie O'Donnell doll over, like I'm literally looking at it right now. Still in box. Is that a problem?
You have an unboxed Rosie O'Donnell doll?
So I just moved and I've got a bunch of stuff.
I feel like it would be more concerning if it were unboxed. Nice.
That is a Rosie O.
The resemblance is uncanny.
Oh, shit. It's supposed to say something, but apparently her voice has now died. Died in transport, but yeah.
She's out of batteries.
No. You can see all my nerd stuff behind me, by the way. Oh,
if that thing comes to life and murders you, I am going to be terrified that we started a new genre of horror movie.
I am.
Yeah, that is. What? Please tell me that was gifted to you by attending a taping of a talk show and not something you bought.
This is. I got it at a thrift store for like $2, but it's about to get beaten to death with a hammer.
Yeah, that's nice. Save that as a bonus. Save that as a bonus content.
I'm not currently hitting the button on that thing, so.
And it's still going. A typical woman.
That's how it starts. That's how it starts.
Typical fucking broads.
I'm kind of freaked out. I threw it into my spare bedroom here. I'm kind of freaked out.
It's only going to stay in there until it murders you later. So
that's what I was waiting for, the door.
The 10 people that are still watching live will know that the doll did it in a couple of days. So
anyway, yeah. Sorry about that.
That's okay. No, it's
I had
good
to show you.
It's good that somebody knows what really happened, so that it's not unsolved forever. What I was saying about that, the biggest one throughout history has to be Bob Saget, right? To go from Full House to then, if anybody who's seen him do live comedy is like, oh my God.
Love his stuff. It's remarkable. His blue stuff is so good and he's so quick with it. But I think when he became a bigger star, his whole shtick, and I would have done the same thing, was, Danny Tanner would have never said this or whatever.
Yeah.
God bless him, though. He did great.
Yeah, he had a tremendous way to kind of pivot that and make it work in that time. But I think, I don't know about you, but I feel excited. Like, I'm probably more excited as a comedian about where we're at right now than I was, at any point in my career up until now, just because there's this weird sort of liberation, when you're at a point like where I'm at, where there's really nothing that anybody can take away from me or cancel. Everything that I do and own, everything I do, I own. It lives on a channel where, like locals completely governed by people with common sense who, don't have some strange agenda to determine or edit what gets to live there. So there is this sort of like weird liberating feeling of sort of like you're in the, it's almost like I feel like I've woken up in the Matrix. Does that make sense? Where I'm like, oh, it's not my body. This isn't air that I'm breathing. Like everything that happens is a result of what I do or what I create or what I put into the world. And it's a very liberating feeling.
It is. No, it is. I'm with you on that. Like you're right. Yeah, it's like we're uncancelable at this point. By the way, that website's not available because I was looking at it for the name of the tour. But like I like, so it's like it really, like at this point, you can't take anything away from me. You never gave me anything to begin with, like
Yeah.
And I think there are more people, who are going to, I think Hollywood wakes up. I think things are going to slowly change. And there are very interesting things on the horizon, especially for me. Like I have been approached by some folks about maybe starting my own production company as well. And it's like, because I wouldn't be the CEO of it. I'd be chief creative for this kind of stuff. But there's a lot of money out there. There's a lot of people in the conservative side. There are a lot of big names. There are a lot of big celebrities that are just sitting around waiting for something to happen. And it's just, when will these first movers come along? And create a conservative product that isn't a family movie about, stopping someone from having an abortion or how they, need to save Christmas. Cause I'm tired of the same goddamn.
Yeah. That's the problem with stuff that gets labeled as conservative content, is that it becomes too much propaganda the other way. Right. Like it's
immediately.
Like, yeah. The thing in terms of, like, I've always said this about comedy, like if I'm ever trying to tell people what to think, I'm missing my mission. Like my job as a comedian, as I've always seen it, is to get people to challenge or question how they think and, look at themselves and go, am I being hypocritical? Is the world hypocritical? Do I apply these same rules to myself that I expect other people to live by? Those types of things. But I'm never going to tell you what that is. I always try to lay breadcrumbs and let people arrive at their own conclusions of where their hypocrisies lie, where their absurdity lies, and then let them, take from it what they will. But I think part of the problem with a lot of conservative content, I'll even go conservative content, is that it becomes propaganda the other way. They're trying to make you Christian. They're trying to make you,
it's so bad.
Pro-life or whatever. It's like, make a good, and by the way, you can do that, but just make a compelling piece of art. Don't call it Touched by an Angel Productions and have Kirk Cameron give a 45-minute, lecture at the beginning of the movie about the importance of following the Bible. Before I watch, just let the art speak for itself. And that's where I think, the right sucks at creativity, is that
because they don't have it.
They lead with message instead of absurdity and funny and humor.
Yeah, no. And you're 1,000% right on that. And that's, fortunately why my career has done quite well with creative. And I do a lot of, it's been weird. So like I've done a lot of things with lobbyists. I've done a lot of stuff with members of Congress and punched up speeches and stuff like that. So I've come from the very, very political realm. And of course my stand-up is pretty much like a live daily show. And so like I'm kind of in that like circle, but I've started to play around with other ventures. And if people pay attention, you'll see kind of where they are. I don't want to get too deep into it, but it's interesting who came out of the woodwork, and it's interesting to see like where funding is. And it's crazy. It's there. Like this is going to happen. And in the next few years, this stuff is going to happen. I think the culture shifts, and it's got to come from people like you and I, and Gina Carano, who's in a really good space. I hope she takes the money from the Daily Wire and then runs and starts her own company. But it's got to come from that's not regulated by the same regulators and the same billionaires who are pearl clutchers who, still hang on to certain things and want to hear. See, so a Dinesh D'Souza movie. God bless Dinesh D'Souza. He's got his own shtick.
And by the way, he makes some very great points in some of his movies, like really great points.
But it's all the same thing.
Yeah.
And you know what you're getting, and it's just not shifting. And like he serves. Look. And I don't want anybody who listens to this to think that I'm knocking him. I think he's great. I think he does his thing, and he's got his lane, and he's mastered it. He is that guy that is there, and he's got that figured out. But that's just not going to convince anybody from the left to come over, and it doesn't really convince people in the middle. It gets the base going, and it makes a lot of money, and it's great. But it's Creating something that is wholly entertainment first and not political based is where we need to be. And, like I said, I think you get it. I think more and more people are getting it. It's also, you have to kind of be willing to risk things as well, rather than, there's easy money for people who want to stay the course and hit those bullet points the way that the donors want you to hit them.
For now, now, until it shifts again. I mean, it's funny. I had something I was going to say about George Carlin, and now I forget what the fuck I was talking about.
He was on top of everything. That's one of the albums I have framed on. I haven't put it up on my wall yet. But.
Oh, I was going to say, part of the reason he attests that, if you ask Carlin, I think it was on a Larry King interview. Larry King was like, when did you feel like you became who people see you as today? What was the turning point in your career? And, Carlin famously didn't feel that he had gotten good until he was in his 50s. And, he distinctly said, the moment I got better at bringing the truth into comedy was when I no longer cared about the outcome of humanity. I no longer cared which side won. I no longer cared which side lost. And I was able to sort of stay in the middle and make commentary about what's awful all the way around the board, or what's hypocritical, or what's absurd. And I think to some degree, it doesn't mean that nihilism has to be the backbone of what you do, but I do think you have to throw caution to the wind creatively and create from a place of not caring what the outcome is.
Yeah. No, that's where all comedy has to start from, or else it's not authentic. I mean, and not many people do that anymore. Just put it that way.
Do you have any curveball surprises that you think could happen in the next year before we get out of here?
What do you mean? Like, we're going to get locked in concentration camps for free speech, or what?
No, I don't think it's going to be like that, but that could be one. I mean,
no,
is there anything you feel like, is coming that people aren't expecting?
I mean, no, I think sadly we're going to be on the same kind of drumbeat for a bit until you get some people who are willing to step up and drop coin and do new things. I mean, like, I'll be real with you. Like, I have kept my distance from a lot of things and a lot of people, and kind of stayed my own course and met my own folks and got my own contacts that are kind of not necessarily in politics, but are conservative and have started to get motivated by what they're seeing. And if there's a curveball, I mean, not to be like an egomaniac here, but if there's a curveball, it's going to come from something probably I'm working on with this kind of stuff. I think there's starting something new. That
not unless you put that doll down the disposal.
That thing has got to get.
It's going to put a halt to the plans real quick.
It stopped talking, by the way, but I won't sleep well tonight. I mean that seriously. But no, look. There's stuff, outside of the same. There's a lot more billionaires than the 5 who have been active in politics. We'll put it that way, and there's more that can be done than getting a bunch of kids together like they do at Turning Point USA and saying the same talking points, or going to CPAC. I was director of marketing. CPAC I think is this week, and I was director of marketing and digital at CPAC 5 years ago, and I never thought CPAC moved the ball for anything. It was just a place to show up and where conservative kids pretend that they're, not banging each other, and they show up and hear the same stump speeches we've heard over and over again. It doesn't move the ball. Moving the ball involves actually creating something new that isn't conservative forward, like you said, or isn't Republican or religious forward, but is on the back end. And it doesn't even have to mention it. You just have good people doing good things. I mean, I almost said something, but like there's a lot of stuff that's out there that is very popular right now that is mainly conservative. And those folks are waking up, and they're waking up in a hurry, and this election woke them up, and they realize that culture needs to shift because we've lost education for the time being. And so, and now that we're the counterculture, there's a lot of money to be made in it too.
Yeah, I love that label. I loved it when Carlin used it all through his career, and I think it's very applicable to where I think a lot of us feel like we lie right now, is definitely counterculture.
Yep.
And and I think I'm most excited about how that manifests in forms of comedy. I think we talked about this a bit before the show, but I think a lot of the clubs, the traditional sort of comedy clubs that book based off of these agency talent reels, and they're ordering off a menu, right, of what the industry is feeding them. I think they're going to be very late, and I think some alternative venues or some new kind of comedy venues, we'll call them counterculture clubs, are going to pop up, speakeasies, whatever you want to call them, are really going to lead the surge in the way comedy continues to grow moving forward. I think we are very much back in the late 60s, early 70s as far as comedy goes in terms of how it will be experienced live. I think it'll be in much smaller, intimate venues, sort of more, there'll be more of a grunginess to it than I think there has been in the past. And, while we didn't necessarily come out of a suit and tie comedy boom, in a lot of ways, it is sort of that way in an official narrative way of like, well, they're not necessarily suit and tie comics, but they're definitely vanilla as fuck comedians when it comes to who had been in rotation heavily at these clubs before the shutdown. And now I think people are starting to wake up like, the only reason that those people sell out on the weekends is because there isn't another club in town or venue in town with a more interesting comedian at the same time. And I think you're going to start seeing more competition that way. And those clubs are either going to have to adapt or die. They're going to realize that their guy who was on the Tonight Show 7 years ago, 8 years ago, and had a small role on a sitcom cannot outsell the guy who has a fucking fire podcast who is into conspiracy theories. And, you know what I mean? And has a fucking following. And that guy is also funnier than the person who's in the mainstream comedy club.
Yeah, no. And that's what's actually kind of interesting. Chrissy Mayer and I are going on tour together here coming up at the end of April, May. I don't know. I have to look at my calendar. I should know probably when I do podcasts what we're doing. I mean, look, I work constantly. It's like I'll be there at some point.
Yeah.
But I think it was like 6 or 7 clubs booked us immediately. And the booking person was like, what the hell? I've never gotten that quick of a response from these clubs. They should have told me where they were booking me first. And when would have been good to coordinate, but still, look, it's great. Look, and people jumped on it, and I'm like, it was just, it's wild. The response is wild. And I'm excited to go out and be a real piece of shit in front of people. And then have really shitty merch. I'm very excited about shitty merch. And that's the most important thing is that like,
that's the core of what it is to be a comedian, by the way, is shitty merch.
Yeah, no. And I'm literally, I went to the t-shirt place. There's a t-shirt place up the street from me today, and priced some things out. And the shirts might actually say shitty merch on them.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
that's hilarious.
So, but yeah,
stuff, man. Is there anything else you want to? Obviously, you got some dates coming up. Is there a website you want to plug, or anything where people can find you and get access to those dates when they come available? They can buy tickets, come see you guys.
No. I don't know what it is. Like I did the Blaze TV with Chrissy last week, kind of on a whim. Like I called in because they needed somebody. Like I'm a really good seat filler on shows, which is kind of fun. Like they're like, hey, last minute nobody's here, can you come in? I'm like, sure.
Yeah.
And so because I wanted Chrissy to get the exclamation points and be the funny one on the show, and so I came in and I was like, do we even have a website where all the things are? And she's like, it's on like ChrissyMayer.com or something like that. I'm like, cool. If you know how to spell her name.
I do. I'll throw it in the banners.
And go and get tickets to come see us. We're going to be everywhere. And I'm going to have shitty merch.
Yeah, people can go to Chrissy's website to get tickets to come see you guys.
I just
like somebody who's not even here. Yeah,
like she's cool, and
but I love Chrissy. Podcast. She's great. Yeah, she's got a great pod. She's got a couple good podcasts. The Wet Spot, and she's also got her podcast.
Wait, that's not her podcast, The Wet Spot?
No, it is. That's on Compound, and then she also has the Chrissy Mayer podcast.
There's 2?
Yes, there's several.
I don't know. I don't know anything about it. I'm the worst. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's okay.
What I know how to do, I just moved on February 1st in my new place, this place, and I know how to put a real good bookshelf together. So I'm going to have a fallback job. I've put together like 7 bookshelves.
You're going to be a task rabbit into the new millennium.
I am. That's where I'm going. Like that's where my career ends up anyway. Unless they cancel me, they're going to be like, we can't have a conservative put our bookshelves together.
Yeah, right. That'll be where people draw the political line.
I'm just going to go stand. Actually, forget TaskRabbit. I'm like OG. I'm going to go stand in the parking lot at the Home Depot and get picked up in the back of a pickup truck.
Oh, there you go. There, first of all, everyone's going to think you're undercover. Everyone's going to think you're an undercover agent who's there to catch people.
Yeah.
They're going to be like, which country are you from, mate? And you're like, Bolivia.
Iceland.
Yeah, Iceland. Yeah. Yeah. It's this is that's probably when the immigrants will know that the country is going to shit, is when white dudes are starting to stand in line at Home Depot next
Not
to
far
them.
from it.
This is DC's bad.
Not far from it.
Yeah. Are you here to hire us? No, I'm here to work. I feel like somebody did that sketch where they were like a white guy and they got run out of there. Didn't somebody do?
So I've seen two. One was the guy was picking up people and he would drive them to an ICE detention center.
That was Ari Shaffir. That was the amazing racist when he took the truck directly to the immigration office. Yeah.
I don't know where I am on that. And then Dwight Schrute. They introduced a character on The Office by picking him up at a day laborer thing in front of a Home Depot.
That's right.
Dwight's assistant they picked up.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I remember that. There's so many deep cuts of The Office that I don't remember until people point them out to me. And they're also sort of like scenes from classic shows like that get stuck in the back of your brain like a repressed memory. I saw an episode of another show the other day where some guy was making chili and was holding the pot and he was shaking like this. And I immediately flashed to Kevin spilling the chili all over the carpet in the office.
So, by the way, on topic, one of the shows that I used to love, it was a British comedy called Balls of Steel. Did you ever see Balls of Steel?
I didn't, no.
Okay, so I would recommend anybody go take a look at Balls of Steel. So they had a few sketches on there that are amazing, and I want to tell you about it because I'm very excited about this. And then then we've really digressed. But
then we've closed strong, as they say in the comedy world.
The one that everyone should go look up, that's all on YouTube. It's called The Angry Black on Balls of Steel. And it was a black guy who was offended by anything that sounded black or offensive. So like he would stand at the park on the grass next to a sign that says "Stay off the grass." And a cop would walk by and be like, "Hey, sir, can you stay off the grass?" He goes, "You telling me I'm on weed? I got to get off weed because I'm black." And like that kind of stuff, like they would set it up. It was remarkable. So they had that one. They had one called Bunny Boiler, where this girl who was kind of hot, like a hot comic chick, would wear a bikini at the beach and then walk up to like some very obvious couple, like a dopey looking guy, and like just flirt with him in front of the girl until the girl like almost fought her, which I thought was amazing. Why the show was called Balls of Steel. And then they had one that was called like Tricky Devil, I think was the other one. And he was a guy dressed as a devil costume, and he would just go around and do very inconvenient things to people. And my favorite was he went into a parking lot somewhere and painted every parking space handicapped. And
I think I've seen a clip of that.
So that stuff, I'm telling you, that was one of the most genius shows on television. But the Angry Black sketch on Balls of Steel is literally what's happening right now, and it's remarkable to me.
Yeah, there was a lot of those sort of sketch shows that addressed that, did it really, really in a really funny way. I mean, Chappelle's Show was iconic from that regard of doing sort of the black white supremacist, and the thing I loved, just sort of observational call outs of like the Mad Real World, which was probably my favorite sketch of theirs, where it was like, instead of being one black guy in a house full of white people, it was one white guy in a house full of black people. And that was one of the funniest sketches ever that they did on that show. I feel like that one gets overlooked for the Rick James and the Clayton Bigsby sketches. I think the Mad Real World was probably the funniest thing they did on that show.
Racial Draft was pretty funny too.
Racial Draft was good. Yeah. Bill Burr being one of the commentators of the Racial Draft was pretty great.
Yeah.
And then of course, like the Training Day Wayne Brady stuff was really funny. There was a lot of it, but that's what sketch to me was supposed to be, is like, using people's assumptions against them. Like I have a bit that I do in my act where I talk about how lazy I am, and I come around to the point of like, man, I'm going to be honest with you guys. If it were legal, I would totally have slaves, and the audience will often get very tired. You'll hear groans. And I just, at that point go like, I just want to point out to you guys, I didn't say what color they'd be. You just guessed.
That's so smart.
Which makes you racist. And then I go into a whole thing about how nowadays there would be so many people that would make better slaves. For instance, gay guys. When you look at the job description, you just get to stand out in the sunshine all day, picking out fabrics, a little bit of light S&M. You're chained up to a bunch of other hot, sexy dudes. I mean, I might have just described slavery, but I also just described Abbott Kinney on a Saturday. Or not Abbott Kinney. God damn it. The Abbey on a Saturday. And yeah, this is how rusty I am, by the way, at not being on stage during COVID. But anyway, my point being, I think the best comedy is subversive. It uses people's assumption and bias against them to make them laugh and go, oh my God, the most fucked up part about that joke is me. I'm the most fucked up part about that joke is because it's based on what I think or what I assume about people.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on all that stuff. I grew up in the hood in Baltimore. A lot of people don't believe that. And so literally in the hood, like we were the white family. And so that's a very interesting, I do very, very interesting bits on that. And I was asked to play MLK in my third grade, Martin Luther King, for the entire elementary school. And there were black kids to choose from.
Yeah, I believe there were. And
it was a black teacher that chose me. So there's a very what a weird... Anyway, we could talk about this forever. Wrap it up. It's been 80 minutes.
We're wrapped up, man. It's wrapped up. Everybody check out Tim Runs His Mouth on Twitter. You can see his tag right there. Because Tim doesn't want to plug a website for his dates, you could go to chrissymayer.com.
I don't know
find his dates.
I have to buy the fucking website. I don't know where to put the fucking I don't know where I'm coming out look where Tim Young is and make sure it's this one.
Listen,
and not the one that does cruise ships.
Yeah, I listen, I bet we could sell that Rosie O'Donnell doll to a trans athlete and we can pay for your website registration to redirect people to Chrissy's calendar for your upcoming dates.
Yes.
Tim Young, thanks so much for coming on and hanging out with us today, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Glad we did.